Welcome to Showcase Broadcast Studios, Real Talk with Michael Wardy. I am Michael Wardy, Certified Financial Planner, Regional Director at Source Advisors, where we work with our clients and their tax advisors on various tax incentive programs that are available to them. Today is not about that. Today is all about intellectual property, all about patents, and anything else related to that. And I'm excited to have Jason Scher with Carter DeLuca joining us today to give some insight, his expertise in this area. And if you have questions, I know we're live on LinkedIn, we're live on YouTube, and we are live on Twitter. If you have questions, go ahead and put those questions into the comments section, and we will do our best to get to those questions. And if we don't, we will follow up with you afterwards with answers to those questions. With that, Jason, welcome.
Michael, thank you so much for having me. I really do appreciate it.
Absolutely. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're here, especially right now, because I know a lot of people, and I've talked to friends of mine and businesses who are former employees of businesses who have left, and they had this idea, and now they just said, now is the time for me to at least try it, because they were working from home, they transitioned, and so they said, I'm just going to try this. I've come up with some cool ideas. That's what I've seen. So this topic I feel is timely, especially because when you have what you and I have talked about before, IP, you want to protect it. So Jason, before you get into that, can you share your background and experience and history in this area?
Oh, absolutely. So I'm a patent attorney and IP attorney, of course, and our firm is probably, we have about 30 attorneys of various disciplines, scientific and engineering backgrounds. To become a patent attorney, you have to have some sort of scientific or engineering background to go into the space and prosecute patent applications, for instance. And, I've been with the firm probably about 14 years now, and a really great firm. We work with all different types of technology, whether it's mechanical, electromechanical. We've got pharmacists here, and we work in all sorts of different spaces, EE, ME, but it's a variety of different clients as well. I mean, it's small, medium enterprises, startups, all the way up to Fortune 100 companies, and we're working in a lot of spaces like med tech or AI, all sorts of different types of consumer products, you name it. I mean, we've done the full gamut of technology, and so you learn a lot of different things from a lot of different people, and it's a very vast and expansive space, and there's a lot to learn, and there's a lot to be done.
No doubt. And I'm not kind of excited. I'm excited because when I hear about this, and you're fortunate because you get to see these ideas before they ever come to market. So you're at the forefront of somebody coming in and say, here's what I have, and this will revolutionize this industry. That's so cool that you get to be a part of that and say, yes, this is great. And you guys do the research and make sure and file it all along those lines. So that's so cool. That's so cool. So I know for me, I have a little bit of knowledge, but for our audience and people that are just starting out in this understanding, hey, I have this idea. When we talk about IP, we're talking about intellectual property, correct?
Mm-hmm.
What is IP? What is intellectual property?
So I think it helps to distinguish what it's not first. A lot of people think of various types of property, like real property. Those are things like buildings and parking lots, or personal property, which could be office equipment, computers, and furniture. Mm-hmm. But IP, intellectual property, is, can take a lot of different forms, but it's usually information, technologies, formulas, brands, logos, designs, those types of things. But typically the best way to say it is they're creations of the mind. And it's sort of a right, that you'd have, or you can acquire through these creations of your mind, and they can take a lot of different forms. Typically, they're copyrights, trademarks, patents, or trade secrets. Those are the most notable ones. And just to quickly distinguish between that grouping, anyway, Copyrights are basically original works of authorship fixed in a tangible medium of expression, and it can be anything like sculptures or paintings or writings. Whereas trademarks are basically this is your branding, and you're talking about how you distinguish your products in the marketplace and show that you have certain amount of goodwill, your company has a certain amount of goodwill. It's effectively a source indicator, and that can be anything from these names or slogans, or it can even be sounds, the embassy chime, for example, or colors. So they take a lot of different forms. And then, of course, you have trade secrets, which is basically confidential information that you want to use and keep so that no one else knows. You keep it a secret, and it gives you the competitive advantage in a marketplace. And that could be some, specific way you manufacture something, or you have a very specific recipe kind of thing, and you don't disclose that to the public. And by doing so, you get that you have a competitive advantage. And one advantage of that is it can be, it could be a valuable asset to you in your business for forever, as long as the secret's never disclosed. And then finally, we come to patents, which people probably think most often as inventions, right? And that can take a lot of different forms as well. That would be effectively, like a design patent would cover the aesthetic appearance of something, whereas a utility patent, which is the second most common, or actually is probably the most common, it covers the actual functional aspect of your invention. So there's different ways you can get patent protection. There's also a third option, which is a plant patent, but I haven't seen that done too often, and it's a little outside my wheelhouse. But it is.
Then we won't talk about that.
Yeah, exactly.
So I remember I went through a phase early, I think it was like in my teens, where Harley Davidson, I remember they had a patent on the sound. So when you were talking about the NBC chimes, I automatically thought about the Harley Davidson noise that it makes. And I think it was called like the potato, because that's what it sounds like, potato. And so anyway, I won't go into that. But I found that amazing, that what you can patent and what you can document is being yours and nobody else can copy it. One thing that I've heard, and maybe this is wrong, is that when you file a patent, is it something that you file here in the States, and then is it something that is protected? Because is it protected on a global perspective too? Like, how do you protect somebody else from somebody else taking your idea that lives in Spain or France or wherever it is?
So that's a really good question. And the fact is that patents are jurisdiction specific. And so if you want a protection globally or in certain countries, you have to get individual patents in those particular countries. So if you get a US patent, for instance, it only protects you in the US. So I can, assert all I need to in the US, but if someone making something in China and I don't have a Chinese patent, I'm not going to be protected. So if you want protection from China, you have to get a patent in China. So there are avenues you can take to go through and do that. There's certain types of filings you can file to protect yourself for at least a short period of time. For instance, there's an application type called a patent cooperation treaty application, which allows you to file internationally in, I would say it's probably about 150 or so member states. And it's basically just a placeholder for you to file in all these countries at one time, and you can develop your business for a certain amount of time. It's typically about 30 months from your original priority date before you have to make a decision on which countries you want to protect. But you have that time period to sort of develop your invention in the marketplace. If you're deciding to go, for example, in China or India or France or wherever you may want to go, and say, okay, well, I want to get patent protection in these countries because I know I'm going to have a market there, or I know I'm going to manufacture there, or these type of concepts come up, and business decisions you have to make as you go forth. And at that same time, for example, if you're a small startup, for example, you may not have the financial resources to file in those types of countries because the costs can be prohibitive if you do form file with respect to the particular government fees in all the countries and the translation costs and you name it. So it's not often done by smaller companies unless and until they get some sort of investment, and that's usually where they would go forth and seek out these different countries, patent protection in those particular countries, if it's, they're so inclined to do that. But it is expensive.
That I know is a challenge especially for startups where they have this great idea and they're trying to protect it, but they can't for financial because of restrictions on finances. But when you protect, so you have a patent here in the States, you're protected here in the States. If somebody in, let's say, Canada takes that, or wherever they take it, can they still build that product because you don't have a patent in that country? They can still build that product. They can sell it in that country or anywhere else. They cannot come to the States and sell it. Is that right?
That is exactly correct.
And I was talking with someone who was confused on that if they build it out there, they can still come in here and sell it. But because they built it out there, that's not the case.
Right. As soon as they cross the borders, they lead up to the border, they're going to have issues. For example, if you're going to have, and that's just, you're speaking specifically about patents, but the same thing goes with regard to copyrights and trademarks. So they're all jurisdiction specific. So if you want that protection in those other countries, you're going to have to file in those other countries.
Right. Okay. And that, like you said, that's for a startup company, it's a bit challenging.
Yeah.
I guess at a certain level, at a certain point, they're able to do that. And so that, like you said, if they're doing manufacturing, if they're doing development, if they're doing sales out there, they should get a patent for out there. Right. Walk through, if you can, how you go about this. So if you have a person that came up with an idea and they really want to protect it, startups are challenged with money. If they don't have the funds, how do they go about that? What's the best way to do it so that they do get that sense of security and protection until they're able to get a stronger position of protection?
So one of the most convenient modalities the United States Patent and Trademark Office provides is called a provisional application, and as the name implies, provisional, it is only temporary, but it does buy you some time, and the costs are insignificant or marginal compared to the typical cost for a full non-provisional application. And this provisional effectively buys you a year's worth of time, and you can have the minimum amount of filing requirements. It's really just disclosing your invention, and you want to disclose as much as you possibly can in that disclosure. What I mean is you're submitting effectively some description of what you have, some pictures if you can, and the more pictures and the more description you have describing what exactly the invention is, the problems you're solving, the advantages, those types of things, you want to include that in a filing, in this provisional application filing. And then you have basically this year to figure out if you want to continue to go forward with this and file it in either a foreign country or convert it in the US. And this timeline allows you to seek out investors and share it and try and sell it and build it up. And perhaps you're going to be also taking that time to further develop the invention. And all those little changes, if they're obvious, you probably don't need to refile on them. But if there's new changes and nuances that make a difference in terms of maybe the patentable features, or it becomes more novel, you're going to want to include those in maybe serial provisionals where you can file multiple provisionals as you develop your changes in your invention. Or by the time you get to your non-provisional date or your conversion date, you can claim the benefit of all those prior provisionals that you may have filed if there's a lot of different changes that you're making while you're trying to develop it. But the good news with that is provisional applications don't ever become public unless you claim the benefit of them and convert the application. So for instance, if you had the year and you didn't sell it and you didn't do anything, it will expire after a year, but no one else will see it, and then you could refile later on. The only thing you're going to lose is the priority date.
Okay. So thinking about what you just described, I mean, my head is swimming. I'm sure there are online services that will say, hey, you have a new invention, you can file for a patent here. I've seen different scenarios of that. It's always easy. You can do it yourself. If you've never done this before, I know the answer, so it is a loaded question. Would you recommend somebody trying it out first by themselves, and if it doesn't work, then coming to you, or do it right the first time?
Well, here's the problem. If you file something you shouldn't, or you say something you shouldn't in your filing papers, that can come back to haunt you. Particularly if you don't provide enough information, you're limited by what you file. So if I file a non-provisional application and I try and claim the benefit of a provisional application that I filed, but it didn't have enough information in it, well, now that I'm going to get the new date, meaning what I filed as the non-provisional date, meaning you even if you claim prior to that provisional date, because you didn't have enough detail in there, you're going to lose all that time. So if a piece of prior art came out, someone else came out with an invention after you filed, but they had more details that you didn't have, and now you're getting this new filing date of the non-provisional date. They effectively are going to be prior art to you, and you're going to be basically barred from getting a patent because they predate you.
Wow.
So you have to be careful.
It's dangerous. Especially if your whole vision, your livelihood, you're putting your heart and soul and everything into this idea, and you think, oh, I'm going to cut corners because it'll save me money.
Yeah.
Have you seen that before? Like, can you share an example of that? If that were to happen, what happened? Or is it doesn't happen?
Well, no, it definitely happens. I mean, just speaking to the last example, where you might lose your rights if some other inventor's coming in with the same or similar thing. That, I mean, that's the worst case scenario. But the other part I've seen, I've had people come to me and they have an invention, and they think they can go it alone. They kind of lay it out to me, and I explain to them the whole process and the costs, and they get concerned, and then they go try and do it on their own because they think they're capable of doing it. And by all means, go ahead, you can try and do it. And they went through the patent office, and they had so many issues, because I monitor it, and they followed up with me later. They had so many issues that they had bend over backwards to get this thing allowed. Ultimately, they did get allowed, but what they got was basically a worthless piece of paper. The most important part of a patent is the claims, which is at the end of the application. It's word phraseology that you use to most broadly describe what it is you've invented without going into the details. And the broader you have this claim language, the more protected you are. So the more words you have, the more narrow it is, the less valuable the patent is. So anyways, in this particular instance, these gentlemen had a patent application that they filed. They ultimately got a patent on it, but each claim was probably 2 or 3 pages long. So it was like no one in the room would ever infringe on this patent. So they spent all this money going to the patent office, paying all the fees, jumping through hoops to get this patent the claims are basically worthless. So, okay, you have a nice feather in your cap, you got a patent, but it's worth nothing in the marketplace. Anybody and their mother can design around it, and it's worthless.
It's interesting that you say that, because you're right. If you do it, you think that you're doing it the right way, but if you don't have experience in doing this like you do, you can have a lot of gaps, and somebody else can come in and say, well, you designed for this, but ours, we designed with this and added this, so it's not infringement. Right,
exactly. And then the other, and there's so much nuance to patent law and prosecuting. One of the major benefits of filing a patent application and getting broad claims and disclosing multiple things is you can ultimately have a single filing, and then a single write-up with whatever disclosures in there, and you may get multiple patents out of this, and you can keep it going. So for example, you get one set of claims, you can file what's called a continuation application and basically go after another feature or certain features more specifically. And so you at the end of the day, you can have 5-10 patents based on this one initial disclosure because you claimed it differently, and so now you have a broader scope. But if you don't know to do that and you don't file it timely enough, your case issues, and all of a sudden, if you didn't take the right steps to file a continuation application, you lose the right to go back and get broader claims and more patents. So whereas you could have spent, just a little bit more money and gotten more patents, and you've gotten yourself so much more protection, and you've protected many more aspects of what you have, and all of a sudden you have this whole portfolio, and the value of what you've provided here is much more significant.
No doubt. No doubt. One other question that I heard is that when you file a patent, this is why some people that I've spoken with decided not to. When you file a patent, that anybody can go onto the USPTO.gov website. I don't know why I know that, but I do. But people can go on there and from another country and pull the patent and just develop off of that. There's no, and I hate to be that alarmist, but when you file a patent, you do have that exposure.
Right. So yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, that's the quid pro quo for filing a patent application is you publicly disclose, your invention in its entirety, so the rest of the world can have it. But what the U.S. government is providing you is this exclusive right to use it in the U.S. But it's limited to the U.S. and your exclusionary powers are limited to the U.S. So, if you want to file in those other countries, you want protection of this, again, we talked about you got to go into other countries. But by the same token, we have that same benefit. We're not the only country out there with patents and inventions being created. We can go to France and they've got their patents are publicly available too, and they expire after a certain amount of time. So if they file for a patent application in France and they're not filed in the U.S., guess what? I can freely use this in the U.S. I've got certain clients that don't even get patents at all. They're not interested in patents. They're just interested in selling product, which is fantastic. You do product, but part of that is you need to know what patents are out there that you potentially can infringe upon. So they look at a lot of expired patents because once they're expired, they're in the public domain. Anybody can do it. So you follow expired patents. This is the pathway to commercializing a product without the risk of infringement by just going off of expired patents or patents that aren't protected in this country.
So a client comes to you and says, we have this new product, we're going to build it. You say, okay, and they don't want to do a patent for the reasons that you said. You go on, you make sure that there's no issues, nobody else has a patent on it. You see that somebody else had one 20 years ago, it's gone. And so they're protected as far as not somebody going after them. If another company comes in and files a patent afterwards, so this company's been producing, tape dispensers, a specific type of tape dispenser, and they've been selling it for 3 years, and then another company comes in and files for a patent for a tape dispenser exactly like that. Can they do that?
No, because the original tape dispenser was already publicly available. So effectively that acts as prior art to them. So if, you could argue, A, they didn't invent it, or if they did, they didn't file in time. So anything that's your filing date is what matters most. So if you look to the filing date, if there's anything before that filing date, it can constitute prior art, which means you can't get a patent on anything that's already publicly or available.
Okay, so you still have some protection if you start selling it and show that there's a trail of it, of that product.
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
As long as you can predate, you're good.
Perfect. So last question. Again, Jason, I appreciate you joining me today for this broadcast. What do you, somebody starts their business, they have a product. What do you recommend they do? Like, what is the process they should follow? Should they just build the product, whether it's a software system, a program, an app, a physical product? Should they connect with you first before they bring it to market? Should they connect with you after they have traction? What should they do? What would you recommend?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You should definitely see a patent attorney as early as possible, as you can, because, you know, there are those risks of, you know, over disclosing something. If you disclose before filing your patent application, you will effectively bar your rights in any foreign jurisdiction if you have any desire to get foreign protection. U.S. fortunately does give you a 1-year grace period for public disclosures that you make by yourself of your own invention, but you know, you still want to make sure you're not. The best way to get protected is to file first. But even more importantly than that, you also probably want to do patent searching. You know, you can start with Google Patents and search that way, but you should also probably have an official search completed so that you know what prior art is available. Because if your invention's already been done, A, you may not get a patent on it, and B, if it's been done and it's patented and the patent is still in force, you may be infringing upon them. So if you are aware of these issues before you even start, you can either you know, go back to the drawing board and come up with a design around, or you know, maybe just take it a different direction. But knowing that information first will save you tons and tons and tons of money. So it's worthwhile to be, you know, smart about it.
That's so true. That's so true. And that's what the most important part of this is, when you put in everything and you realize I cut a corner that I probably shouldn't have.
Yeah.
It's a detriment to your business. So Jason, if they want to contact you to learn more about how to pursue this, have questions for you, whatever the case may be, I have your email at the bottom scrolling, but if they want to call you, how do they reach you?
My number is my direct number is 631-719-7029.
Perfect. All right. So Jason, we're at the bottom of the hour. Thank you again for joining. Michael, I really appreciate it. Great information. Yeah, really good content. We'll try and get you back in a couple months to see how things have evolved in the world of product development and patent and IP, that whole world. And it'll be the beginning of the year. So it's always fun to reconnect on that side. For the audience, for YouTube subscribers, LinkedIn, for Twitter, thank you for joining. Please share this with anybody that you know that's coming up with new ideas, new concepts. They're thinking about a new invention. Share this video so you give them some additional insight to help them protect themselves. Contact Jason. If you have questions, if they have questions, definitely reach out to him. A wealth of information is available from him and is available for you. Thank you, everyone, for joining. And we will launch this onto the podcast, which is a global podcast with 27 countries that it's being broadcasted in now. So Jason, enjoy the rest of your day, and everybody enjoy your day and weekend, and stay healthy. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks again for having me. Appreciate it.
Take care.
Bye now.